Welcome to this lesson on converting with customary units. Today we're going to talk about how to use rates to convert between customary units. It's kind of an introduction to all of this, or maybe a little bit of a review for some of you. So first we have to go through our different conversions. So from feet to inches, we know that in 1 foot there are 12 inches. In 1 yard there are 3 feet. Or as my dad likes to say, how many feet are in a yard? Depends on how many children are playing in it. I know that's a good one. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. And if you've seen Remember the Titans, that'll definitely help you remember. Petey definitely has to run 5,280 feet for dropping the football. And 1 mile equals 1,760 yards. All right, and then with weight. Now here's something we have to pay attention to, ounces. Ounces with weight and ounces with capacity are two completely different things. So 1 pound is equal to 16 ounces, and 1 ton is equal to 2,000 pounds. Now, of course, there's a bunch of different conversions you could make. Like you could say, okay, well then 1 yard would also have to equal 36 inches, because in each of these 3 feet there's 12 inches, so 12 times 3 is 36. But we're going to go through and do all those things as we go through this unit anyway. So you do not have to have all those written down. If you want to make different lists, I left you a little bit more space on your notes. All right, and then we have capacities. So here we have fluid ounces. Now, fluid ounces are what we use to measure capacity with. So when you look at your water bottle, you'll notice it says FL period, OZ period. That's fluid ounces. That's for liquids, right? So 1 cup is equal to 8 fluid ounces. 1 pint is equal to 2 cups. 1 quart is equal to 2 pints. And 1 gallon is equal to 4 quarts. Okay, so we have examples like the gallon man. We have a picture of him in class. And I know some people have seen the drawing where it's the big G. Okay, so inside the gallon you have 4 quarts. Oh boy. And then inside your 4 quarts you have 2 pints. And then inside each of your 2 pints, you have 2 cups. And then you can put 2 C's in there. My goodness, I did not draw that large enough at all. So you can draw this on your own if you'd like. You do not have to have it. It might be helpful for some of you who like the more visual. So we could say C, C. I can't write that tiny. C, 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 C. C, 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 C. Whew. Right? And then, of course, you can always go through and figure out some of your other markers, too, where you're looking at it going, okay, well, if there are 2 pints in a quart and there's 4 quarts in a gallon, then in 1 gallon, so 4 quarts, and there's 2 pints in each quart, would have to be 8 pints. Again, if you want to list those, you're absolutely welcome to do so, but these are really the major ones, just working your way up the chain. All right, so with our conversions, right now we're just going to work our conversions where we end up getting fraction or decimal answers. So we're not going to worry about how many ounces it is or anything like that. We're just starting off with this. And this is where we really use our rates and our rate equations. So this is really the same thing that we've been doing previously, but now we're doing this with customary units. All right, so we have the Milwaukee Zoo, who has a scale that only measures in pounds. That might be important. They put their elephant on it and see that he weighs 2,600 pounds. They need his measurement in tons, though, for their informational sign. So I want to go from pounds to tons. I know that there's a conversion that tells me that in every 1 ton, there are 2,000 pounds. All right, well, I know pounds. Oh, that's too many L's there. I know pounds, and I'm trying to get to tons. So I know I need tons on top and pounds on bottom, and then I'm going to multiply that. So I have 2,600 pounds times 1 ton over 2,000 pounds will give me my amount of tons. Now, we've been talking about this a lot lately. When you have something like this where you have the 1 over 2,000, so we know we end up dividing. Well, we're going to look at that a little bit more closely. So if I'm trying to take 2,600, I know that in 1 ton there's 2,000 pounds. So I'm trying to take this 2,600 and put it into groups of 2,000. When I do that, I know I have to divide. Okay, so when I'm looking at this and saying, okay, well, I'm taking these and putting them into groups of 2,000, I know that I divide. It's not always going to be division, and we'll talk about what that looks like when we have multiplication instead. So here I have 2,600, and I'm dividing it by 2,000. I know that 2,000 can go into 2,600 once, and I have 600 pounds left over. Oops. That doesn't make this 1.600. Remember, I have to add my decimal if I'm using long division. I have to add my decimal up at my answer and bring down a 0. 2,000 goes into 6,000 3 times. 2,000 times 3 is 6,000. And I get 0 left over. So I know that the elephant weighs 1 3/10 of a ton. All right, so I have the Washington Monument that's 555 feet tall. And Tyler wants to know how big that is compared to the size of football fields, which are measured in yards. So what this tells me is that I want to go from feet to yards. And I know the conversion for feet to yards. I know that for every 3 feet, it's equal to 1 yard. So I have the number of feet, and I need to multiply that by my rate to get me yards. Since I want yards, that goes on top, and my feet go on bottom. Now again, I'm taking my feet and I'm putting them into groups of 3 to make a yard. So if I put the feet into groups of 3, that gives me 1 yard. So I actually know that I'm taking the number of feet and dividing it by 3 to give me the number of yards. So I take 555 and divide it by 3. And I can do that with long division. 3 goes into 5 once. Bring down the 5. 3 goes into 25 8 times. I was thinking of 4. And 3 goes into 15 5 times. So I know this equals 185 yards. Okay, so I know the Washington Monument is 185 yards tall, which is almost, for Tyler's sake, 2 football fields. It's insane. So imagine this monument in Washington, D.C. is about 2 football fields tall. All right, and the last one that we're going to do together, we have Ivan, who needs gas for his riding lawnmower. He knows his, that should say mower, holds 5 gallons of gas. His gas can does not measure gallons, though. It measures in pints. How many pints will he need to fill his lawnmower? So that's our question. So this one actually gave us a question, so we know that we're looking for pints. So I want to go from gallons to pints. Well, I don't have a conversion for gallons to pints. I do have a conversion from gallons to quarts, and then I can go from quarts to pints. Okay, so I can do this one of 2 ways. I prefer to figure out my conversion, so I only have to multiply once. So I know that in 1 gallon, there are 4 quarts. And I know that in 1 quart there are 2 pints. So each one of these gets 2 pints. So then I know I can take 4 times 2 and I get 8. So I know that in 1 gallon there are 8 pints. So what that tells me is that I can just use the rate of 1 to 8 instead of using the rate of 1 to 4, getting an answer, and then using the rate of 1 to 2 and getting an answer. I can just do it all at once. But you have to be able to figure out these pieces, and sometimes drawing a picture helps. Sometimes we're able to look at it and just say, okay, in 1 gallon there's 4 quarts. In each quart there's 2 pints, and you multiply by 2. If you need a better picture of this, so inside your gallon is a quart, and a quart. And inside each of those quarts are 2 pints. So you know that there are 8 pints in a gallon. All right, so now I know that I have gallons. Multiply that by my rate, and it's going to give me pints. So I want pints on top, and I want gallons on bottom. So in this case, I'm going to end up doing 5 gallons times 8 over 1 equals pints. Now, in this one, instead of dividing, we're saying, okay, we're taking this big gallon and we're splitting it up. So here's this gallon. And inside this gallon, there's 4 quarts, and then in each of those quarts, there's 2 pints. So we're saying, okay, these smaller units, how many of these smaller units fit inside this gallon? So when that happens, when you're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, remember you get to multiply. Okay, so we'll write a little quick note later, but in this case we do 5 times 8 and that gives me 40. So he needs 40 pints worth of gas. Alright, so you are going to do these you-try problems on your own. And just as a little reminder, so when you go from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, you get to multiply. And when you go from a small unit to a big unit, you actually divide. So keep in mind, as your units get bigger, your numbers or your amount gets smaller, and as your units get smaller, your number would get bigger. Right? As always, if you have any questions, please make sure to write them down or email me so we can go over them in class.